At the will reading, my parents actually laughed while handing my sister Julia $6.9 million. And me? They set a single dollar across the polished table and said, "Go earn your own." My mother smirked. Some kids just don't measure up. But the moment the lawyer opened my grandfather's final letter, everything froze. My mother's smile vanished, cracked, and then she started screaming. My name is Emily Carter. At 28, I never imagined sitting in a Boston law office watching my sister get a fortune while I received one wrinkled dollar and a sealed envelope with my name on it. Grandpa Henry had always been my anchor, my safe place. Why would he leave me this symbolic insult? The sting hurt, but the quiet spark in the attorney's eyes told me something hidden was coming. I grew up in a curated, upper-middle-class neighborhood outside Boston. My parents, Thomas and Margaret, cared about appearance more than anything. Latest gadgets, perfect outfits, the right friends. Julia fit this world effortlessly. Beautiful, social, polished, the perfect daughter to show off. Then there was me. While Julia worked country club events, I was rescuing wildlife, cleaning beaches, buried in environmental science. To my parents, passion without prestige meant I was a disappointment. Environmental science won't pay your lifestyle, my mother would sigh. My father would tell me I needed to be realistic. But Grandpa Henry never judged me. He lived simply despite being wealthy. He taught me that purpose mattered more than price. Summers with him at the lake house were my escape. We'd fish on the dock, talk about climate change, life, and dreams. He made me feel seen. Holidays at home were performance reviews. "Julia just secured an internship," my mother would announce. Then she'd turn to me. "Emily is still exploring," with that thin smile. Grandpa would wink and sometimes directly challenge my father. Not everyone measures success by their bank account. Everything shifted when Grandpa was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Suddenly, my parents and Julia started visiting him with gifts and exaggerated concern, timed suspiciously with the value of his investments. I visited him the same way I always had: soup, stories, company. 3 months before he passed, he held my hand and whispered, "Timing is everything, Em. The truth always rises." I didn't understand then. The day he died, my mother called with cold efficiency. "The funeral is Friday. Wear something appropriate." The funeral was elegant and impersonal, exactly how my mother liked things. My parents networked with his business associates. Julia cried in perfect photogenic timing. I stood alone by the photo board I helped create, grieving quietly. A week later came the summons. Will Redding, mandatory attendance. My mother bought a new suit. Julia cleared her schedule. My father calculated taxes. I just wanted closure. The law office was on the top floor of a glass building. My mother scolded my simple black dress. Julia arrived dramatically. I sat slightly apart. Grandpa's attorney, Mr. Caldwell, began the reading. He gifted cars to Grandpa's friend Arthur, a life estate to Lena, the housekeeper, and donations to charities. My mother grew impatient. Windshield tapped her nails. My father checked his watch. Then, "To my daughter Margaret and her husband Thomas, I leave my Beacon Hill home and Palm Grove property." My mother lit up. "To my granddaughter Julia, $6.9 million to be distributed in quarterly installments to encourage financial responsibility." Julia gasped, already calculating. And then, my granddaughter Emily, $1 and a sealed envelope. My hands trembled. My parents barely hid their satisfaction. My mother laughed sharply. "Well, that settles it." But Caldwell wasn't done. Henry requested a video be played. The screen lit up. Grandpa appeared, frail but sharp-eyed. He thanked Arthur and Lena sincerely, then addressed my parents with polite but pointed comments about ambition and appearances. Blankets to Julia, he warned that her trust would be distributed slowly, so she learned responsibility. Then he looked directly into the camera. "Emily, my Em, you've always seen what others miss. Remember what I taught you. True wealth isn't measured in dollars." He leaned in. "My will may seem unfair, but there's more. I've set up a series of tasks. Follow them exactly. Interfere, and the entire estate goes to the Henry Carter Foundation." Everyone stiffened. "The first step begins today. Emily, go to my lake house. Alone." The video ended. My mother immediately said, "Emily will take us with her." Now suddenly I mattered, I said. "I'm going alone." Henry was explicit. No one else is permitted to interfere in the first stage. Any violation activates the remainder clause. Everything goes to the foundation. Julia opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again when she heard the word everything. Outside, holding the envelope and my single dollar, I felt it clearly. Draco had set something in motion. And for once, I wasn't the pawn. On the way to the Berkshires, I pulled into a rest stop and opened the envelope. Inside was the lake house key, still attached to the fish keychain I'd given him, and a letter in his familiar handwriting. "M, if you're holding this, you've already seen the first performance. Trust yourself. Go to the lake. The study is where we always began. Love, Negligent." The lake house looked exactly the same, quiet, weathered, peaceful. Pine trees framed the water. The dock stretched out like a memory. Then 2 cars pulled up behind me. My parents, Julia. Course. They climbed out with practiced concern. "We're here to support the process," my mother said, like this was a corporate retreat. I ignored them and walked up the path. The cabin door stuck the same way it always had, then gave with a soft groan. The familiar scent, pine, books, dust, hit me so hard my throat tightened. Everything was as Grandpa left it. I walked straight to the study, unlocked it with the second key, and stepped inside. Maps, bookshelves, a worn desk facing the lake. On the wall hung a photo I'd never really noticed before. Grandpa, standing in front of a building labeled Carter Innovations. On the desk lay a sheet of paper, dates and numbers in neat columns, and a single handwritten question at the top. Where did it all begin? Inside the drawer was a leather journal, his investment diary, bracelets, $2,975 invested in a small tech company in 1975, his first major success. The last line of the page read, "Constrained. The truth is in the foundation. Look beneath the surface." A chill ran through me. Mine had always sat on Grandpa's desk. I'd played with it 1,000 times as a kid, lining up the pieces while he worked. On impulse, I picked it up. The backs felt off, slightly loose. I twisted it gently. The bottom came away with a soft click, revealing a tiny hidden compartment. Inside were 2 things, a tiny key and a folded slip of paper. Julia appeared beside me, almost on cue. "What's that?" she asked, curiosity sharpened by money and mystery. "I'm not sure," I said, unfolding the note. "Second letter in the floor safe. Combination, date of betrayal." Behind us, my father had found an old photo album. "Nothing but sentimental junk," he muttered, flipping through pages carelessly before tossing it aside. Photos slipped out and scattered across the floor. "Thomas!" my mother snapped. But she wasn't worried about the memories on the carpet. She was already tearing pages from the album, scanning them for anything useful, discarding what didn't serve her. "There has to be some record of his investments here," she murmured. I knelt to pick up the photos. Most were familiar, Grandpa holding my mother as a little girl, the 3 of us at the lake, me grinning with a fishing rod too big for my hands. Then I noticed a clipping tucked between 2 pictures. A newspaper article. "Local sells patent for millions." The photo showed Grandpa shaking hands with another man. The caption read, "Henry Carter sells innovative circuit design to Weston Technologies." "Mom," I said slowly, Did Grandpa own a company called Carter Innovations? Her hands froze mid-tear. That was before your time, she said quickly, voice going sharp. A small venture that never amounted to much. But the edge in her voice? I knew it. It was the same tone she used when she buried uncomfortable topics over dessert. I looked back at the clipping, this time at the date under the headline. 1995. Fictions, beneath the surface. I scanned the room again. Half hidden under a small rug, I noticed a faint seam in the hardwood. My heartbeat kicked up. I pulled back the rug. The safe stared up at me, its metal dial waiting. Date of betrayal, I whispered. What does that even mean? Behind me, my father was on the phone, talking calmly about development potential and lakefront value. Julia was at the bookshelves, pulling out volumes and checking for hidden compartments like this was some glossy scavenger hunt. I turned the dial. 6, 1, 7, 9, 5. A loud, satisfying click. The safe opened. Inside lay a thick envelope and a small leather notebook bound with a rubber band. Before anyone could move, I grabbed both and stepped back. "What did you find?" my father asked sharply, his phone forgotten. "Another letter from Grandpa," I said, holding the envelope against my chest. "And a notebook." "Well, open it," my mother snapped, her polish finally cracking. "This treasure hunt has gone on long enough." "I think I'm supposed to read it privately first," I said. "That's ridiculous," my father shot back. "This concerns all of us. Whatever he's doing affects the entire family." The will was clear about following his instructions exactly, I reminded them, hearing Caldwell's warning echo in my head. "I'm not triggering that remainder clause because you're impatient." My mother's eyes flashed. "Emily Carter, you will show us that letter right now. We are your parents. This is a family matter." Something inside me, years of being dismissed and talked over, finally clicked into place. "No," I said, steady. "He addressed it to me. I'll read it first and share what's appropriate afterward." My father took a step toward me, face darkening. "You ungrateful—" "Stop," Julia said suddenly. They both turned to her, stunned. Julia never contradicted them. "She's right," Julia continued. "We can't risk that clause. I have 6.9 million reasons to follow the rules exactly. Let Emily read it first." It wasn't exactly solidarity, but it was enough. "I'm going to read this in private," I said, moving toward the door. "I'll tell you if there's anything you actually need to know." "This is absurd," my mother hissed. "What could possibly be so secret?" "I guess we'll find out," I replied, sounding braver than I felt, and walked out. Julia followed me into the hallway. "Emily, wait," she said, voice softer. "There's something you should know." I turned. For once, her mask had slipped. Beneath it, I saw something real. Fear, maybe. Regret. "What is it?" She checked the empty hallway. "Things aren't good with Mom and Dad," she said quietly. "Dad's firm lost big clients last year. They've been living on credit and pretending. They're counting on this inheritance." The words hit harder than I expected. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Her smile twisted. "Maybe I'm tired of the act too. Just be careful. Desperate people do desperate things." My father's footsteps echoed from the study. I tightened my grip on the envelope and notebook and headed for the door. "This isn't over, Emily," he called after me. "You can't keep family matters to yourself." I didn't turn around. For the first time, I realized family matters might mean something very different in Grandpa's story than it did in theirs. I drove into town and checked into the small inn where Grandpa and I used to eat after fishing trips. The bell over the door chimed softly as I walked in. Helen, the innkeeper, looked up and her expression softened. "Emily," she said gently, It's been a while. I was so sorry to hear about Henry. He was a good man. Thank you, I said, the ache in my chest tightening. I miss him. Staying at the lake house? She asked as she handed me a key. Not tonight, I replied. Too many memories. And I need some quiet to go through his papers. She nodded. Room 8 has the best view of the hills. He always said it helped him think. In the small, cozy room, I spread everything out on the bed. The envelope, the notebook, the old clippings. I opened the notebook first. It wasn't just a log of investments. It was a map. Properties across 3 continents, investment portfolios, patents, business interests. The numbers added up to more than $24 million. That single dollar from the will reading felt more symbolic than ever. I opened Grandpa's letter with shaking hands. M. If linking this, you've taken the first step toward understanding why things are the way they are. The notebook shows the truth about my estate, far more than what was revealed at the will reading. But money is just money. What matters is the truth behind it. Your next task is to investigate Carter Innovations. Caldwell has the records in a separate file. Call him. He'll give you access. Once you understand what happened there, you'll know why I structured everything this way. Be careful, M. The people closest to us can sometimes be the ones we know least. Trust your instincts. They've always been good. Love, blinking, Grandpa. I didn't hesitate. I called Caldwell. Henry expected my Carter innovation and placed on the will. His result around now, he said calmly. I have the Carter Innovations files ready. I'll send them to your email. Minutes later, my laptop pinged with a flood of scanned documents. I started reading. Carter Innovations had been Grandpa's company, founded in the early 90s, built around a revolutionary circuit design that could change how computers used energy. Small, but growing. Patents pending. Real potential. Then, in 1995, he suddenly sold it all to Weston Technologies for far less than it was worth. Why would someone as sharp as Henry Carter do that? I dug deeper. There it was. A memo from my father, Thomas Carter, who had handled some legal work for the company. In it, he warned Grandpa that a competing patent would make their technology worthless and urged a quick sale. 6 months later, Weston Technologies used Grandpa's design to launch their most successful product line, making billions. No competing patent ever appeared. My stomach dropped. I kept scrolling, and then I saw it. My mother's name, listed in an old Weston HR record. She'd been working in their acquisitions department, right when the sale went through. A memo from a Weston executive. Special thanks to Margaret and Thomas Carter for facilitating a smooth, advantageous acquisition. Additional consulting fees arranged as discussed. The pieces locked into place. This wasn't bad luck. My parents had helped Weston get Grandpa's company cheap and were rewarded quietly for it. Side contracts, undisclosed payments, all neat, all buried. They had sold out their own father for money. I leaned back in the chair, heart pounding, staring at the screen. Was this what Grandpa meant by his greatest disappointment? I remembered him on the dock beside me years earlier, eyes on the water. Sometimes, Em, he'd said softly, the people closest to you can be the most blind to your best interests. I thought he meant colleagues. I hadn't realized he meant his own daughter. The next morning, I called Caldwell again. I found the Carter Innovations records, I said. Did Grandpa know about my parents' involvement? He found out about 5 years ago, Caldwell replied. An old contact at Weston confessed the side deals. Devastated doesn't really cover it. But your grandfather was strategic. He wanted proof before he confronted anyone. And did he get it? I asked. Yes. Everything you've just read is documented proof. After that, he restructured his entire estate. What you saw at the reading was just the surface. I spent the rest of the day reviewing every page. Shock slowly hardened into something colder, clarity. By evening, I knew exactly where I needed to be. When I drove back to the lake house, my family was on the deck, wine glasses in hand, talking about development options. We were just discussing how to profit from Grandpa's home, my mother said brightly when she saw me. Or, I said, dropping my bag and setting a stack of printed pages on the table, were you talking about Carter Innovations and how neatly you helped Weston buy it? Her glass clinked hard against the wood. My father's face slipped into his professional negotiation mask. I don't know what you think you've uncovered, he said carefully, but business decisions from 30 years ago are hardly relevant now. Fraud is always relevant, Dad, I said. So is betrayal. I spread out the documents between us. My mother's memo to Weston's CEO outlining Grandpa's vulnerabilities. My father's falsified legal opinion urging a rushed sale. The backdated consulting contract paying them nearly $500,000 after the deal. Where did you get these? My father demanded, voice low. Had copies, I said. He knew what you did. My mother recovered quickly, her social mask snapping back in place. You're blowing ancient history out of proportion, she snapped. Business is complicated. Your grandfather did very well from that sale. He was robbed of millions, I replied, by his own daughter and son-in-law. Julia stared at the pages, color draining from her face. Is this true? She asked, looking between them. Did you really do this? Of course not, my mother said sharply. Emily is being dramatic as usual. But Julia's eyes stayed on mine. This is what Grandpa's game is about, isn't it? She said quietly. He's trying to make it right. Before I could answer, tires crunched on the gravel outside. A courier appeared at the sliding door, holding an envelope. Delivery for Emily Carter, he said. Mr. Caldwell instructed me to deliver this at exactly 7 p.m. My pulse jumped. I signed, took the envelope, and opened it. Inside was another letter from Grandpa and a short note from Caldwell. To be opened when the truth is laid bare. My hands shook slightly as I unfolded Grandpa's letter and began to read aloud. My dear family, this letter is being read, then Emily has discovered the truth about Carter Innovations. The betrayal I experienced from those I trusted most was the greatest disappointment of my life. But it taught me to look more closely at character, to watch what people do when they believe no one is watching. The will reading you attended was part of a test, one final assessment. The true distribution of my estate depends entirely on how each of you has behaved during this process. Everything has been observed and documented. I swallowed. As if on cue, headlights swept across the deck. Caldwell's car pulled in, followed by 2 others. He walked up with his briefcase, a notary, and another man, one of his security specialists. My mother stood so quickly she knocked over her wine glass. This is outrageous, she snapped. We will contest all of this. A dead man cannot control our lives like this. I wouldn't advise that, Caldwell said calmly. Henry anticipated legal challenges. Contesting the will would simply send everything to the foundation, as stipulated. He set his laptop on the table and opened it. Besides, he added, looking directly at my parents, you might want to see this first. He pressed a key. Grainy footage filled the screen, the study, captured from a discreet corner. My parents tearing through Grandpa's things, wickiping pages from photo albums, my father on the phone talking about developing the property like it was already his, my mother muttering about extracting value while family memories lay shredded on the floor. The lake house has been under discreet recording for the past week, Caldwell said. Henry wanted to see everyone's true colors, not their performances. My mother let out a strangled scream. You had no right. This is an invasion of privacy. My father lunged for the laptop, but the security specialist stepped smoothly in front of him. Mr. Carter, he said evenly, I'd advise against damaging evidence. That has its own legal consequences. Evidence of what? Julia whispered, horror in her voice. Evidence of character, Caldwell replied, and potentially evidence related to the fraudulent conduct around Carter Innovations. Turned to me. Emily, your grandfather's instructions were clear. Once all facts were known, you would decide how to proceed. Decide what? I asked, even though my chest already knew. Whether to pursue legal action against your parents for their fraud, he said, which would almost certainly lead to criminal charges, or to implement the alternate inheritance structure Henry designed. My father went pale. You wouldn't, he rasped. We're your parents. Parents who called me a disappointment my whole life, I said quietly, who mocked my choices, who betrayed your own father for money. He opened his mouth, closed it. What's the alternate plan? I asked, eyes on Caldwell. Caldwell handed me a document. Henry transferred the bulk of his real fortune, approximately $24 million, and the intellectual property that should have made him far wealthier, into a trust, he said. You would control that trust, with ethical oversight. The property's already assigned. The Beacon Hill home, Palm Grove, Julia's $6.9 million remain as in the public will. Everything else falls under your decision. So she gets everything, my mother said bitterly. After everything we've done for this family. I met her eyes. What have you actually done for this family? I asked. Other than lie, manipulate, and sell out the person who built all of this. You ungrateful little, she began, voice rising. Stop, Mom, Julia cut in sharp. Her shoulders sagged. It's over. My father tried one last pivot, the negotiator in him scrambling for footing. Emily, listen. Business is complicated. We never meant to hurt anyone. Let us explain. But the time for explanations had passed. Documents, the footage, Grandpa's letters. They said more than any speech could. Mr. Caldwell, I said finally, my voice tight but steady. I need time to think. Can we meet again tomorrow? Of course, he replied. Henry left one final message for this moment. Would you like to hear it now or later? Now, I said. He tapped a key and Grandpa's voice filled the night, warm, steady, achingly familiar. Em, if you're hearing this, you know the truth now. Forgiveness is optional. Wisdom is mandatory. Whatever you decide, do it with clarity and purpose, not out of anger. Remember, what you build from this will matter more than what anyone tried to take. The recording ended. My parents left soon after, my mother in tears, my father stiff and silent. Julia lingered in the doorway. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I didn't know about Carter Innovations, but I knew things weren't right. I stayed quiet anyway. That doesn't make me much better than them. I didn't have an answer. When the door clicked shut behind her, the house felt suddenly, impossibly hollow. I drifted back into Grandpa's study as the sun slid low over the lake, turning the water gold. On the desk, half hidden behind files, I found a photo of us on the dock, both of us laughing, fishing rods in hand, hair wild from the wind. On the back, in his uneven handwriting, true wealth is measured in moments like these. For the first time since he died, I broke. I stood alone in that small room and sobbed, not just for losing him, but for the family I'd wished I had and never really did. The next morning, the lake was a glassy mirror of blue sky. I'd barely slept, my mind swinging between justice and vengeance, punishment and healing. By sunrise, the fog in my head finally cleared. I knew what I had to do. I called Caldwell. I want everyone at the lake house, I said. My parents, Julia, you, your witnesses, and Arthur, if he's willing. It's time to finish this. By noon, the living room was full. My parents sat rigid on the sofa, dressed flawlessly as always, as if neat lines and pressed fabric could still save them. Julia chose a chair a little apart, her expression troubled but steadier than the night before. Invoking Arthur sat near the window, cap in his hands, watching with quiet sorrow. Caldwell and his associates stood by the doorway, their presence formal, almost ceremonial. I stood by the fireplace with Grandpa's final trust instructions in my hands. "This isn't just about inheritance anymore," I said. "It's about what kind of legacy Grandpa leaves behind and what kind of people we decide to be." My mother scoffed softly. "Spare us the speech, Emily. Just tell us if you're sending your own parents to prison." Julia flinched. I looked at my parents, at the tightness in my father's jaw, the desperation in my mother's eyes. I said, "You deserve prison. You stole from your own father. You lied to him, exploited his trust, and then tore apart his home the second he died." My mother opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. "I'm not saying that to be cruel. I'm saying it because it's the truth, and we're done hiding from the truth." Silence. I turned to Caldwell. "If I press charges, what happens?" "Given the documentation," he said, "and Weston's potential cooperation to avoid their own liability, it's almost certain your parents would face criminal prosecution. This would also trigger additional scrutiny of their current finances." "And if I don't?" I asked. "We proceed solely with Henry's civil structure. The trust comes fully under your control with the ethical guidelines he drafted. Your parents keep what was publicly left to them, unless they choose to sell or mortgage it further." I took a breath. "When Grandpa and I talked on the dock," I said, "he didn't talk about winning or punishing people. He talked about impact, about how money can either deepen damage or repair it." I looked at my parents. "I'm not going to press criminal charges," I said. My mother sagged in relief, her hand flying to her mouth. My father exhaled like he'd been underwater. "But there are conditions." Their eyes snapped back to mine. "First," I said, "you will both sign a full written confession of what you did with Carter Innovations. Caldwell will hold it in escrow. If you try to challenge the will, harass me, or pull any legal stunt to claw at the trust or my control, that confession goes straight to the authorities. No more games." My father's throat worked. That's mercy," I cut in. "You're welcome." I turned to my mother. "Second, you will stop using Grandpa's name for social currency. No more stories about smart family decisions. If I hear about you spinning this into some victim narrative, I will release the confession myself." Her eyes burned with humiliation, but she said nothing. "Third," I said, turning to Julia, "you keep your $6.9 million. Grandpa wanted you to learn responsibility, and it's your chance to prove him right. But your distributions will stay quarterly, just like he designed. If you want help learning to actually manage it, I'll pay for a financial advisor who answers to you, not to Mom and Dad." Tears filled her eyes. She nodded. "And the trust?" Arthur asked quietly from his chair. "What are you going to do with all that, Emily?" I looked at him, and at the lake glittering through the window. "The trust will fund the Henry Carter Foundation," I said. "For real this time. Environmental work, ethical tech, education for kids like me who were told their passions didn't pay." Caldwell's mouth twitched in something like approval. "I'll take a modest salary for managing it," I added. "Enough to live on, not enough to turn into what my parents became. The rest goes to projects Grandpa would have believed in." My father shook his head slowly. "So you're the hero now," he said. "Judge, jury, saint." "No," I said. "I'm just the only one in this room doing what he actually asked for." I turned back to Caldwell. "And the lake house?" I asked. Caldwell smiled faintly. "Henry left a private codicil. The lake house was always meant for you. The earlier bequest of other properties to your parents stands, but this place was never in question." My chest tightened. "Good," I said. "Then that's settled. This house stays in the family. My definition of family." My mother's eyes flashed. "You can't just erase us, Emily." "I'm not erasing you," I said softly. I'm setting boundaries. You keep your houses. You keep the lives you've built on pretending everything's fine. What you don't get is access to mine. Not until I see real change. Not performance, not manipulation. Real change. Julia swallowed hard. Does that apply to me too? She asked. I met her gaze. No, I said. You're on your own path now. If you want to be in my life, you're welcome, as long as you stand on your own feet, not behind them. Her eyes shimmered. I want that, she whispered. I don't know how yet, but I want that. Then we start there, I said. Caldwell cleared his throat gently. If everyone is clear on the terms, I'll prepare the paperwork. My parents signed the confession with shaking hands. My mother's signature was tight and angry. My father's, trembling but controlled. They didn't look at me when they finished. When it was done, my father straightened his cuffs like it was just another business meeting. You'll regret this someday, he said quietly. Maybe, I replied, but at least I'll regret it on my own terms. They left without another word. The house felt oddly lighter. Arthur stood and came over to me. Henry was proud of you, you know, he said. Kept saying you'd have the spine to do what he couldn't. I blinked back fresh tears. He did enough, I said. Arthur shook his head. He started it. You finished it. He squeezed my shoulder and left. Caldwell gathered his things. I'll be in touch about the foundation paperwork, he said. Henry was right about you, Emily. You see what others miss. When they were gone, the lake house was quiet. Just me, the dust motes in the late afternoon light, and the echo of decisions that would shape the rest of our lives. I walked out onto the dock. The wood creaked in the familiar way beneath my feet. The lake shimmered, clear and endless, reflecting a sky that seemed bigger than it had yesterday. I sat at the edge, bare feet dangling over the water, and pulled the photo of Grandpa and me from my pocket. True wealth is measured in moments like these. I looked at the house behind me, the study full of secrets finally dragged into the light. I thought of the trust, the foundation, the kids whose lives might bend a little differently because a stubborn old man refused to let his legacy be defined by betrayal. I thought of Julia, standing on the edge of a different kind of decision. Parents, sitting time, the cost of what they'd done without anyone rushing in to smooth it over. The ache of losing Grandpa was still there. I suspected it would always be there. But under it, something new had settled. Not quite peace, not yet. Maybe this was what Grandpa meant when he said the truth always rises. It doesn't rise clean, it drags up everything with it. The rot, the beauty, the possibility. A breeze drifted across the lake, cool and gentle, lifting a few strands of my hair. I closed my eyes. For the first time in my life, my future wasn't something my parents designed, Julia performed, or Grandpa protected. It was mine. I slipped the photo back into my pocket, turned my face to the sun, and stayed there at the edge of the dock, letting the quiet soak in, measuring my wealth in the only way that had ever really made sense, in moments like this.